Hey, everybody, this is Shelby Blankenship, one of your TAs with the Modern Management of Older Adult Division with ICE. So, today we're going to be talking about nutritional tracking and how we can use apps like MyFitnessPal to use for data to collect for our older adults during session and how that can be used later on once they're discharged from our care. A couple of things I wanted to mention before we get going is we've got a couple of live classes coming up. We've got Falls Church, Virginia this coming weekend on October 7th with me and Alex Germano. And then on October 14th and 15th, we'll be in Fountain Valley, California. And then finishing out October, we'll also have October 21st and 22nd in Matawan, New Jersey. I apologize if I said that incorrectly. And then for Essential Foundations, we are starting a new cohort in October 11th, and then Advanced Concepts October 12th. So definitely get on those if you want to join us. We would love to see you out. But let's get to our topic. So we're going to be talking about tracking nutrition, how it's vital, especially for our older adults, but really this can go for any of our clients, and how I use MyFitnessPal. So I'm in an outpatient setting here in Nashville, Tennessee, just a little bit north at Stave off Hendersonville. And this is something that just keeps coming up again and again and again. So I figured this would be a great opportunity to kind of educate some people on some opportunities that they could do in their own clinic. This doesn't have to just be for outpatient. This could definitely be used for home health or any other avenues, as long as someone is able to use this kind of tracking or whatever. If they have some family members that can help them as well, this could be super helpful. So the biggest thing with tracking their nutrition is there is a lot of people, a lot of different diagnoses that can really be impacted by this. It's not just like your sarcopenia and your frailty. Like that's one that definitely comes to mind first. But I use this a ton with people with chronic injuries and illnesses. This can be as like, hey, I've had a shoulder issue for 4 years, or hey, I really struggle with diabetes. Another one is even just acute injuries, like somebody's, especially like post-op or anything like that, maybe even like a relatively new stroke. And the biggest reason that we want to track nutrition, it's not just for like aesthetics, it is for healing capacity. If your nutrition is not in a good spot, the likelihood of you healing from this injury, illness, etc., goes way down. So I have worked with people who have diabetes for a very long time. And one of the biggest things is regulating blood sugar. And this is not just for people with diabetes. This is people with all, I mean, a lot of people are in that pre diabetic realm, but also people not even on that realm. When you're having those constant up and downs in blood sugar spiking or depletion, you're having a lot of issues regulating like healing, which is really the biggest thing that a lot of our clients are coming to. They're trying to heal from back pain or a shoulder issue or a stroke or anything like that. So if we can regulate their blood sugar through nutrition, that can be super helpful. Now, another topic for another day would be doing something like a continuous glucose monitor. And we might chat on that in a future podcast, but that's not exactly what we're going for. But just so you know, that's something, if you're thinking about blood sugars and that is immediately what pops in your head, that's something that you could definitely chat about. But so some things I wanted to touch about is for blood sugar. If somebody is constantly over that 200 realm, like ideally you want to be in that like 90 to 110 is kind of like the happy sweet spot. Type 1 people who have type 1 diabetes, it tends to be a lot more difficult to regulate just because they have nothing helping them. It's all based on, either their pump or their insulin shots that they're doing. So that can be a little bit more difficult to have that range. But once you're over 200, the healing properties like completely stop working. Like they are not helpful for you. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. So getting it, especially in that sweet spot, that 120 or lower, can be especially important for healing. But when blood sugar is spiking and it's not in the realm that we want it to, the blood vessels are constricting. So we're not getting the oxygen and the nutrients that we need to those areas. And so basically our immune system is not doing what it needs to do to heal the area or systemically what we need. So going back to why do I use MyFitnessPal? One, I can see what type of foods that they're eating to see if like those have a tendency for big, blood sugar spiking. You can always look at those lists of high or low glycemic indexes and see, what can be super helpful for them, especially if you're noticing some certain trends. Another thing that I'm noticing is that people who've had a lot of chronic injuries or have had issues in the past where they had like a big, maybe like a massive heart attack and are trying to recover, especially with this population, they are significantly undernourishing when it comes to calories and when it comes to protein intake. They might be eating a bunch, what they think is a bunch, or they're always full, but they're not getting the necessary nutrients that they need to do the things that they need to do to get that muscle mass up to heal from that chronic injury. So what I've done with MyFitnessPal, it's nice because it's free at the base. Just download. There's a ton of pop-ups, so you just kind of have to educate them on, not looking at those or just doing the X on them. But actually will allow you for breakfast, lunch, and dinner to track the macros for each of those is with the premium. But for as a whole, you can actually see what the percentages they are getting throughout the day. So what I'll do is they'll come in, I'll teach them how to use the app. They're going to track and I always tell them it's a little tedious to start. It's kind of like doing a bladder diary if you're familiar with that for pelvic floor. It's tedious to start, but it's one of those things like you measure it a few times and then you kind of know like, hey, this is 1 cup of oats or this is 1 cup of whatever. I have them measure each of those meals or snacks or whatever things that they're doing. And then they bring it back. And I said, don't change anything. I want to just see what you're doing at baseline so we can get a good idea of what is going on. And it is so interesting. It's kind of like we talk about in MMOA Live of checking vitals, how people can be just walking in and looking totally asymptomatic and having these crazy blood pressures. Same with nutrition. I've had some people who are CrossFitters in their 70s and they come in and they do their MyFitnessPal and they're getting 1,000 calories a day. I'm like, no wonder why your shoulder has been hurting for 4 years. You're like barely getting enough nutrition to be able to like sustain life at this point. But so many of them are just so concerned with one, not gaining weight, right? They don't want to be, fat or pudgy or whatever or fluffy. I've heard that one quite a few times. But they're not as hungry. It's kind of like water intake. They just don't have that urge to just be eating or drinking as much. And so the insight for that we normally listen to our brain or our stomach and be like, oh yeah, I'm full, is not there. So having this data is super helpful when we're able to be like, okay, your protein intake was 50 grams between Monday and then you had 50 grams also on Tuesday. I need you to get that up to a certain amount. So say somebody weighs 140 pounds. My goal is to try to get them as close to 140 grams of protein. Now, I'm not going to have somebody jump from 50 to 140 in one day or 1 week. It's going to be a steady progression, one, so that they adhere to it, and two, so they don't feel like, any like huge changes to your system at that point, it's like it goes through withdrawals. It's just not happy about it. So we'll usually maybe start with like, okay, you're at 50 right now. I want you to consistently be every day at 75. We do that for a couple of weeks, and then we're going to shoot for maybe 100 or 90 or something that's tolerable and able to be like actually adhered to. Because ultimately, if we're not having enough calorie intake and we're not having enough protein intake, we're not sure if our sessions are actually just completely depleting them or allowing them to actually recover and get to do the things that they want to do. So after every session, between sessions, they will constantly track it. They'll come in for their next session. I will have them log in. I will look at every single day and I will put that in my objective measures so that I can say, hey, on an average, we're getting, 100 grams on Tuesday, 120 grams on Wednesday and 110 on Thursday. So average maybe between 110, 115. And you can make a goal with that. And the biggest reason for the goal is, hey, I want my patient to be able to have over 100 grams of protein in their diet per day to promote healing and recovery so that they can perform or participate in a sport or be able to do certain amount of ADLs, et cetera, et cetera. I think if you kind of turn the thought of nutrition being more of a fuel to be able to do things versus, hey, an aesthetic choice, I think that can super impact not only our older adults, but this is something I've seen a lot with our younger adults, especially females. If we kind of change that attribute of like, hey, you're going to be able to participate in your sport, you're going to be able to play pickleball 4 to 5 times a week, and you're not going to be as just like exhausted because you're eating enough. That really kind of helps shape the mindset of how nutrition is more of a fuel than purely just a like a more gluttony type of like only a like the sugary stuff is good. So I think that kind of mind shifts will be super helpful. And using MyFitnessPal has been very helpful for me. I'm sure there's tons of other apps out there that have probably not nearly as many ads, but that one has been super nice for me. So I hope you all will give that a try. I'm going to do a little Instagram thing of how I will like actually track it and what specific things I look at in case you've never used MyFitnessPal before or are not sure where to look. So be looking for that, but definitely be tracking this. This is one of those things that I would not be surprised in the future if it kind of becomes, I know we have like walking is the sixth vital sign. I feel like this is going to be like the seventh vital sign, like enough protein intake, because so many people just don't even know where they're at. They're like, yeah, I eat healthy, but usually it's like I do a vegetable plate or I do this or I do that. And it's those little inconsistencies of not getting enough protein really add up. And so if we can add protein and really kind of harp on that, that can be super helpful. The last thing I'll note with MyFitnessPal is it comes usually with some like automated like calorie thresholds or percentages for the macros. There is a way to edit it. I don't know. I know at one time you could edit it without having to pay the premium price. But usually what I'll do is my goal is when they look at that nutrition grid is for it to look like a peace sign, for it to not be like super wonky one way or another, that and really focus more on the protein side. That can be super helpful. Now, it's not that fat and carbs aren't important, but most of the time the protein intake is where we are super deficient. So I will sometimes either tell them to ignore, like the calorie amount, especially if they have a history of eating disorders. Like that's not just for young kids. That definitely goes into our older adults. So just kind of be mindful with that. Like that might need to be something that just is like over overdone. Maybe you put like 5,000 calories or something crazy so that they don't over think about that number too much. But definitely be kind of tracking those things. It's super nice, super helpful. And I've seen some great changes. I had one guy specifically with sarcopenia that has been tracking this. I've been seeing him for about 6 weeks. He's already gained about 4 pounds of definite muscle. He's been able to do more in his workouts. He's even noticed that like during gardening, he's not nearly as tired, and just his capacity to go from that frailty realm to that pre-frail and then robust is the direction we're going, which is awesome. So definitely use this guy. It's super, super nice and helpful. It shouldn't be too cumbersome, and it's good for us. So we could use that on ourselves. So I hope this was helpful. I hope we get to see y'all at a Modern Management of the Older Adult something, whether it's live, EF, or AC, or just here on the socials. But we'd love to connect and hope y'all are having a great Monday, and we'll see y'all next time.